Door shut. Check 1, 2. Mic levels, all good? All good. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. I think we're all good to start, darling.
What? Darling? No, I'm not your darling.
The Gaming Lovers Podcast with Brendo and Jem.
Welcome to another episode of The Gaming Lovers. However, this one has a little bit of a difference to it. It's not The Gaming Lovers, it's The Gaming Brothers. Accompanying me, I am Brendo, is Mr. Steve.
Thank you for having me. This is my first foray into podcasting, so a privilege to be here.
Oh, it's a privilege for me, let me tell you. We are brothers-in-law, so there might be an asterisk after Gaming Brothers if we try to name it that.
The Gaming Brothers-in-law.
In-law. Yeah, it depends if we have a character limit. Not quite sure. Now, the reason you're here, my good friend, is that I decided we're going to be talking about the upcoming PlayStation Mini Classic console. And since our friendship was basically founded upon the great PlayStation 1...
Yes, this is true.
Who better to talk to?
And this is a console that I actually feel comfortable that I can talk about. You know, I'm not the biggest gamer going out there, but flashback 20 years to 1998 when I first got the PlayStation, and over the next probably 2 or 3 years, this is the console I played most of all of my gaming life. So I feel a little bit more confident that I can talk about this without being out of my depth.
Unless it's overcooked, you got no input.
Yeah. There's a bit of a gap from between 2001 to 2017 of my gaming life.
Now, here's a little history lesson for you, ladies and gentlemen. I had a multitude of Sega input in my primary school days, but early high school, I was surrounded by Nintendo fans, and so I chameleoned myself to blend in with them. But the problem is, I heard about these other games on these other consoles that were coming out and had no one to talk to about them until I met you.
Yes, well, even before I got my PlayStation, there was the big debate. Which side would you choose? Would you go down Nintendo path or would you go down the PlayStation path?
Things can't always be friendly as far as those battle lines, but I was able to find friends on both sides of the war and therefore was able to expand my gaming knowledge, which made me more of a gaming lover, one might say.
The best of both worlds.
So the PlayStation Mini Classic due to come out early December, just in time for Christmas, if anyone wants to buy me a little something.
Hint, hint.
5 games have been announced when the announcement was made of the PlayStation Mini, including these 5 titles. Now, have you had any experience with these? R4, Ridge Racer Type 4.
I have heard of that one. Never played it, never owned it. So maybe that's a good reason to get it, to play some of the games you never played before.
Well, with the SNES Mini and the NES Mini, there are many games in there that I'd never played, and that's half the appeal of anything that gets re-released. Mm-hmm. If you loved it the first time, you can re-experience it, and if you missed it the first time, well, there you go. You can catch up on those memories that you missed out on.
Perfect opportunity there.
I had a Ridge Racer game of some sort, but I'm not quite sure which one it was. Wild Arms is a game I'd never even really heard of.
Yep, you've got me stumped there. Never heard of Wild Arms.
It was a very early PS1 game, a JRPG set in like a fantasy land, but there was mysterious relics, arms, one might say, which were like pistols and things from a civilization gone by. So I never played that. Tekken 3 is also confirmed.
Yep, and I can understand that. Tekken was definitely a big title on the PlayStation, so I can understand that. I definitely have played that one. So
Tekken 3, on average review scores checked at GameRankings.com, is the highest rated PS1 game at a cracking great 95.8 average review score.
Wowee!
Now, I used to love fighting games purely for the unlockables. I'd love having a base roster, but you knew that if you beat Time Attack within a certain time, you could unlock someone else. And if you did survival mode and beat 20 opponents, you could unlock a dinosaur. Tekken had that bit of weirdness to it.
Which game had Lizard Man?
That was Soul Calibur. Even you, Lizard Man. The 4th game that was announced is Jumping Flash, which holds the Guinness World Record for first 3D platforming game, beating Mario 64 by almost a full year.
There you go. Okay, wow.
Another game I've never heard of.
Absolutely. I was about to say the same thing. Never heard of that one.
When they announced these 5 games, I'm like, I don't know any of these. Are they good?
Have I
Are they any
missed
good?
something?
And Final Fantasy VII, you may have heard of that. It didn't quite get the fanfare it deserved at the time.
My brain's a little cloudy on that one.
Well, that's a strife.
That's a poor joke. That's the first poor joke that I have
no
put out.
shortage.
There'll be plenty of them. But yes, definitely heard of Final Fantasy VII. Never played it.
Well, I've played it several times, so I've got the experience to put in my 2 cents. And my 2 cents are that I'll probably play it again.
I did watch a friend of mine play it while he was playing through it. Probably, about 99. So, in that time frame of where PlayStation was huge and Final Fantasy was obviously a big game. But yeah.
I'd never really heard of it prior to the PlayStation era because it was on the Super Nintendo, which I didn't have. It was primarily a Japanese series, which I hadn't really dabbled in that fandom yet of the Land of the Rising Sun. So it snuck up on me. We'll talk a little more about the Final Fantasy series later.
So tell me, this new console, or the retro console, does it come with 5 discs with that game for those 5 games, or is it on some sort of condensed hard drive or something?
It'll all be on the flash memory of the console itself.
Well,
There'll be no discs involved. The actual console itself is quite small, and you probably couldn't even fit a CD in it.
Well, that's small.
Well, they're small. Have you seen my mini SNES?
No.
It's about the size of my smartphone.
Wow. Okay, so no need for CDs and discs and all that sort of stuff. Just all inbuilt.
So we thought we'd take the challenge with just those 5 games announced. Doesn't matter if anything else was announced. Just with those 5 already locked in, we figured there's going to be 20 games on it. Myself and Mr. Steve, we thought we'd fill in the gaps ourselves. What would we put as the remaining 15 games? And we'll find out right after this.
Share the love. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Gaming Lovers.
Now, my good brother, Mr. Steve, doing my research about the PlayStation 1, having a look just down memory lane, I was actually shocked to find out the PlayStation 1 launched in Japan in 1994.
Wow. Okay, if you had asked me when I thought it was released, I would have thought 95, because I remember at school, one of the guys had got one, and it was like, what? How can you afford this new thing? The rest of us are on Super Nintendo and thinking this was great. This guy had a PlayStation. That was incredible. So I would have thought 95. There you go.
Yeah, they sort of slipped under my radar as well until I had a friend who also got one, but that was only in 96. So I was out of the loop, I guess. But that's nothing strange if you know my video game history in primary school. I was well out of date.
Well, I got mine in 1998. So I was still, I know Japan and Australia release was different, but 4 years after, and I thought I was like right on it. So there you go. That goes to show.
Half a generation off. It actually started as a joint project with Nintendo to develop a CD-based add-on for the Super Nintendo. But Nintendo went back on the agreement, and then Sony went, well, screw you, we'll make our own console. And by the end of that console generation, the Sony PlayStation outsold the Nintendo 64 3-1.
Bit of a mistake there, Nintendo. Nintendo, if you have the technology to build a time machine, that might be a good idea to go back.
Well, they did have a design to make a time machine. It was a joint project with Sega, but they went back on the contract. So, unfortunately.
I was just going to say, I imagine if you can create a time machine, maybe just sell them. Maybe you'd probably make a fair bit selling them.
Then someone else would go back in time and say they made it. So then they get the money.
Okay, we're starting to get confusing with this space-time continuum
Welcome to
stories.
The Quantum Lovers podcast. Now, 2 games that I can almost say definitively will not be on the PlayStation Mini Classic. I'm just going to talk about them first because I'm very disappointed. Those 2 games, starting with Ape Escape. Now, the PlayStation Mini comes with the first edition of the PlayStation controller. Sort of semi-boomerang shaped.
Yep.
D-pad, face buttons, shoulder buttons. That's pretty much it. No sticks.
No sticks. No.
Sticks were not invented yet.
And I have never owned a controller that did not have the sticks.
Yeah, well, neither did I. But when I first experienced the PlayStation, my friend who had Demolition Derby had the original controllers, and I found them a little bit uncomfortable, but sort of endured it at the time. But Ape Escape requires the DualShock. It has gadgets that use both sticks to control. You've got a propeller that you rotate the right stick and it shoots you up into the sky. You've got a radar. You use the right stick to angle it which direction. Oh, there's monkeys over there.
So without the sticks, it's not playable. Therefore,
impossible to be played without sticks.
Therefore, we can safely assume Ape Escape, which is a very big title on the PlayStation.
It would have been one of my 15 had it been able to handle it.
It will not be on this console, we believe.
I'm disappointed. And secondly, was a big hit in the arcades, and then they released an edition for the PS1 using the Namco G-Con 45, the most badass light gun I'd ever seen at the time. Point blank.
That gun definitely was a lot better than the gun from the original Nintendo system with Duck Hunt, which I had.
What sounds cooler, the G-Con 45 or the Nintendo Zapper?
Yeah, I think if you put a 45 in there, yeah, you're going to win it hands down. If
You've got the caliber of the light. Yeah, fun fact, TVs these days that do not have the CRT technology are incapable of using light guns on them.
There you go.
So even if they released an add-on for it, you probably wouldn't be able to use it. So
imagine trying to find one of those old TVs now. Maybe if you drove down the street that someone has put it out in the front lawn.
I have two, but Jem complains if I have them operating because they squeal.
The noise, yes.
So
I used to love Point Blank. That was a great party game.
My goodness.
If you had friends over and it was just like kind of let's have a bit of fun with this. Just put that on, shoot some targets, and fun was had by all.
Well, not
Who said guns were a bad thing?
Not in this generation. We're not going to have fun had by none.
Yes, because it won't be on there.
But enough of the beating around the bush. Top 15 games that we think should be on the PlayStation Mini. Starting with Dino Crisis.
Ah, yes, Dino Crisis. Okay, so if you are familiar with the survival horror type of game, this was kind of like the, what would you call it, younger brother of the Resident Evil series.
Yes, still made by Capcom. That was their first foray into trying a 3D graphic survival horror. Resident Evil had the static sprite-based background with a fixed camera. So you could have more detailed things, but it was basically just a picture, the background.
Gotcha.
Whereas Dino Crisis had the 3D environment, so the cameras could pan along with you. You had 3D enemies and yourself as well. Had some great puzzles. We loved a good DDK disc.
We definitely did. I remember I got stuck on one for a long time, and I was at school trying to work it out. I'd taken all the letters in and started working out. I came up with an answer. All I wanted to do was go straight home and play it. Loved this game. I really liked it. I didn't like it as much as Resident Evil. However, I played this right after I played Resident Evil 2, so I still had that love of that type of game, the horror, the puzzles, and it wasn't until many years later I actually finished the game with all of the endings. Mm-hmm. So I only finished it the first time and then put it away, played the next game. It wasn't until years later, picked it up again, got all of the endings, and probably loved the game even more playing it probably 2 years after it first came out.
Yeah, I think you actually have to play through both pathways to unlock the third, almost like true ending possibility. So you kept everyone alive.
Mm.
Very, very cool. Shinji Mikami, the director, said that Resident Evil is more survival horror, but Dino Crisis is panic horror. Which, for me, I've always liked dinosaurs as a kid.
Yep.
I thought, yes, let's play a horror game with dinosaurs. But I think a velociraptor is far more scary than any zombie monster hunter, anything that Resident Evil threw at me. So,
well, most of the time you can outrun a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can outrun a velociraptor.
You could just about bloody outwalk a zombie.
And they could walk through doors from time to time. There was ones that would be able to come through the doorway. In Resident Evil 2 at the time, that was not something that you were used to.
Nope.
So you would run out of the room and be safe.
And
And in
also,
Dino Crisis, not so much.
a Velociraptor would take like 5 shotgun shells to drop as well. And that
yes.
ammo is limited.
Oh, yes, it is. Definitely.
Good times, good times.
And plenty of jokes that we have from that game.
Oh.
There's no point going into them because they won't make any sense. But this game is definitely still something we quote even to this day.
Now that's a lasting legacy.
The next one we want to talk about is actually the first game that I had on PlayStation. I actually got it with the PlayStation when I bought that, and that was Gran Turismo.
The first Gran Turismo game, the best-selling PS1 title, sold over 10 million units.
It was definitely a popular game, and if you were a petrol head or rev head, depending on what you go by, or let's just say a fan of cars, this game was probably the game to get. I personally wasn't a big fan of cars, but I tell you what, after playing this game, that's probably the highest interest I've had in cars was playing that game.
I would agree with that as well from myself. And you know me, there's conversations going on about car races, and I'm like, I have no idea what anyone's talking about. It's never interested me, but with Gran Turismo, I was excited to buy my Nissan GTX3. I don't know cars.
I had a Nissan Skyline that I had modded up to the point where I could not lose a race, which was good, but eventually over time, it meant that you probably lost a little bit of interest in the game. However, it was a lot of fun, buying the different parts, winning races to earn money, building up your car to the fact that you became almost unstoppable.
I had a bit of trouble adjusting early on in Gran Turismo because I was used to games like Daytona USA and things where you just hit the accelerator, you steer. If you want to turn a corner, you just power slide around it. We're fine. No problem. Colin McRae Rally. No problem.
Yep.
This, you had to realistically brake at the right time or you were just going straight into a wall.
I think I spent the first 3 days just trying to get my first license on this game where you had to drive as fast as you could and then hit a certain point, brake within a short space designated at the end of the raceway. If you could stop in that section, you would kind of get the next stage of your license testing. I found it very difficult to do, and I thought, maybe I'm just not cut out for this.
I'm not a pro driver. Have you played Gran Turismo 2?
I did have Gran Turismo 2. I didn't really play as much of that as I did the first one, but I do know that Gran Turismo 2 is considered even better by many people than the first one. But as I said, I think by that time, because I had played Gran Turismo for hours and hours and hours, I just didn't want to invest that much amount of time. Again. To build up to a car that I could win a lot of races in. So I did play it, enjoyed it, but didn't play it as much as Gran Turismo, the original.
For a lot of these games on this list, we tried to have no double-ups from the same series. So it depends on whether you want to go for the most groundbreaking entry, which is usually the first, especially at this time in gaming history. There's a lot of franchises starting afresh. Mm-hmm. Or do you go for the more refined sequels, but then you miss out on the entry point of the series? So it's a tricky decision, but we think Gran Turismo 1 gets the nod.
Yeah, definitely. I think there'll be a bit of a balance there where there is some sequels that did outmaster their original and definitely deserve to be put in, even in spite of the, missing out on that original play.
Now, speaking of franchises that got their start on the PS1, how could we not feature a Tomb Raider game in our 15 that we're slotting here on our PlayStation Mini Classic?
Absolutely. And I'd be interested to see if it is still as hard a game as it was when I first played these. Tomb Raider was so difficult that I don't think I could play it without cheating. I think I used some cheat codes or something to skip through levels or a walkthrough or something. This game was hard.
It wasn't only complex level design. If you botched a jump, and it was very easy to botch a jump. Even trying to line up a jump, sometimes you would accidentally hop off the back of a ledge and slide into a pit of spikes.
Yeah.
I played the demo of Tomb Raider and had no idea what I was in for because I thought, oh, this is fun. Oh, there's tigers trying to get me. I'll just keep jumping and they can't get me and I'll shoot them. Yay, I'm incredible. And then I think there was a giant T-Rex that scared the heck out of me and I did not want to go back near that series ever again.
So you played Dino Crisis instead?
Instead, yes. No, it was just not what I expected in that game.
I had borrowed the third Tomb Raider game from a friend and could not get anywhere because I think it's like in the first area, maybe the second, a monkey steals like your bag and you have no items, no weapons, and you've got to hunt this monkey down. I couldn't find him. So I was trapped and I just went, you know what? I'm going to put this game aside and play something a little bit easier.
Yeah, I actually played through Tomb Raider 1. I downloaded it on the PS Vita, which, for all intents and purposes, has been my PlayStation Mini classic in recent years. I got quite a few PS1 games legally downloaded on that from the PlayStation Store. No piracy here. And I played through with a guide because, like I said, without a guide, you have no idea what's going on in that game half the time. But it did feel good to finally conquer Tomb Raider 1, 20 years after it came out?
Good job.
Oh.
Good job there. Yes, you'd be reading a guide and it would say something like, see that little crease in the wall? You can grab onto that.
Yeah, and you're like, I hope I'm aiming at the right one because
I'm about to fall to my death.
I'm like 100 feet in the air. So, again, which Tomb Raider game do you think should make the cut? Tomb Raider 1, rough around the edges. Tomb Raider 2 improves pretty much every aspect of it. But do you go for the start of the series?
I think in this instance, yes, you go to the original and let people experience that original Tomb Raider experience. Being angry that they cannot play this game because it's too hard. I think everyone should share that, the same as we shared in the late 90s.
Everyone should share the frustration. Now, one little quirk that might cause issues is that the Nintendo Minis that came out have 2D side-scrolling artwork and things like that. They're low res, but they're designed to be low res and they look good. They're sort of timeless, that art style. Early PS1 games with their blocky graphics, their horribly low frame rate, I'm actually quite curious to see if many of these games are actually still enjoyable today.
Well, that's right, yes. Playing on the newer TVs, the much larger than your 33-centimetre TV that you might have had back then that you were playing on.
Lucky boy, 33 centimetres.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how it presents, how these games present on the big screen.
I do have a tiny little 18-inch LCD that I might be able to play these on. That's what I play my mini SNES on because it works a lot better graphically.
It's like a computer monitor or something.
Basically. Yeah, got it for $10 at a garage sale.
$10?
Have you not seen this TV?
Please join us next week for Brendo's bargain hunting.
Oh, trust me, I've made some bad decisions in my life as far as bargain hunting goes. I purchase things that are completely unnecessary. But one series that was on the Mini NES continues on the Mini SNES and then will potentially continue again on the PlayStation Mini. Something I've never actually played 1 second of, and that is Castlevania, Symphony of the Night. It's highly regarded as one of the most loved PlayStation 1 games. It's always in the top tier of a top 25 list or whatever if people are compiling their favourite memories of the PlayStation 1. The fact that there's a HD remaster coming out in 2018 may be a problem for a original version to be also released in the same year. Whether that causes conflict, who knows? But I figure if they love the series, they're all available. You've got the Nintendo ones, you've got the Super Nintendo ones, and why not throw a PlayStation 1 version in as well?
Well, I think they've set a precedence there that perhaps you could get all of those mini versions out and play them all. Now, this is a game that I also haven't played. I have heard of the series, but never played them. A perfect opportunity for those that have never played it to play that as well. And if it is that highly regarded, maybe we've missed out on a gem. Maybe other people can too. Now, that's not gem as in the other gem that is not here right now. Not that gem.
My gem.
But an opportunity there to continue that on all of the minis. Yes, if a HD collection would be the better way perhaps to see it. However, we're playing these games for nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to necessarily have it in that form. I reckon put it on the mini.
And 20 years ago, we were both video gamers, but I'm sure that our interests were a lot more narrow as far as our genres, as far as our ability to actually even afford a lot of games. So a lot of them did go without being noticed or without being within our reach. So having some games in there that we know that we have not tried that we would like to, Castlevania Symphony of the Night gets the nod.
Absolutely. I think most of my games would either come up with a EA Sports, it's in the game, or the following game contains scenes of blood and gore. So anything in between that is probably what I missed out on, which is probably where this fits into it.
Fantastic.
Speaking of games with blood and gore, this has to be one of my favourite games of all time, Resident Evil 2.
You got to say it right.
Resident Evil. How much have we talked about this game over the years?
Again, one of the game series that solidified a young friendship because I loved Resident Evil.
I think the third one had come out by that time. We were both playing through the third one, but the second one for me is still the best Resident Evil game that I have played.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those examples where I think you should put in the sequel. Resident Evil 2 should be put on the mini PlayStation.
I always struggle to identify which of the first 3 Resident Evil games is my favourite because I have incredible fond memories of the first game. The second game exceeds it gameplay-wise and story-wise, and the fact there's 2 different scenarios and characters and everything like that. And then Resident Evil 3, for some reason, I just really attached myself to the Nemesis. Maybe
Yes.
it was the gigantic, slimy spear tentacle through my head.
No other game could bring about such fear as Resident Evil 3 with the Nemesis chasing after you and that music that would hit. And then you could run through the door. He would come after you. So they had changed that with this from the second one to the third one.
You just never knew when he was going to show up, and he had not only a giant 8-foot frame and bulletproof, basically, but sometimes he'd show up with a rocket launcher just for good measure.
And I think he would have had some pretty bad breath to
He
add to his repertoire.
He had no lips. It was exposed gum 24/7. That can't be good for the dental hygiene. Resident Evil 2, you can choose to play as either Leon Kennedy. Leon S. Kennedy. Let's not forget the S.
Yes, that's important.
A rookie police officer on his first day in the job at Raccoon City Police Department.
What a first day to have.
Or sister of one of the protagonists of the first game, Claire Redfield, who's looking for her brother.
Claire!
We did love a bit of Resident Evil back in the day.
Bit of trivia for you. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, no doubt I will. You know me.
The date of the outbreak of Resident Evil, was it not July 24th?
The original outbreak in the mansion, I believe, is somewhere around there. Resident Evil 2 and 3. I know that Resident Evil 3 starts with Jill Valentine saying September 28th, daylight. The monsters have taken over the city. Somehow, I'm still alive.
I'm gonna go with it. If I'm wrong, please contact the gaming lovers on either Twitter or Facebook. But I believe the outbreak was July 24th, 1998. The date of my 14th birthday.
Well,
what a day to celebrate.
We never like to have something tragic happen on our special days, but at least it's fictional.
It's my birthday. Why couldn't it have happened on another day?
Resident Evil 2 also had the interesting dynamic that if you played Leon first and you played Claire second, the experience would be different if you played Claire first and Leon second. Certain characters show up at different points, things change. You've got a giant dude in a trench coat who's chasing you around certain areas, chasing a different character for different reasons. And don't let us not forget the joy that Big William Birkin has given us over the years.
Big Willie B, as we affectionately call him.
Him and his gigantic shoulder eye.
The shoulder eye that was so moist.
Oh, fond. Another game that's actually being remade. Are you aware of this?
I am aware. I've heard that announced on your podcast previously, and that I am really looking forward to see that moist eye.
Oh, in all of its 4K glory.
Oh, it's going to be perfect. Yes, the element of having the ability to choose who will you play as first and then follow up, or not so much follow up, but see the other side of the same story as someone else was a really good touch. I believe my first playthrough was Leon A, Claire B.
Most people do that because Leon is disc 1,
Yep.
Claire is disc 2. However, I believe canon is Claire A, Leon B.
I believe you're right on that. I believe you are. The first time I played this, I was blown away. It was the complete changing of how I viewed video games. But from before that, playing the Super Nintendo, I had games like Mario Kart and, Mario. They were quite cartoony in
Things
their
you'd
nature.
play
Bit of
for
fun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The colours were bright. I played Resident Evil 2, was probably the second or third game on the PlayStation. The dark colours, the fire, the just the blood and gore, just the fear that game brought about, and even the cleverness of it with the puzzles and just the landscape. This changed my view of games, and that is why it's one of my favourite games of all time.
Before we move on to our next entry, I don't know if I have it in me to have another Resident Evil 2 playthrough because I spent many an evening unlocking one of the Fourth Survivor minigames by beating Claire A, Leon B, Leon A, Claire B, and then doing it again, all on hard, with no saves and no first aid sprays, purely to unlock not only an umbrella soldier called Hunk, but also a living block of tofu.
Well worth it.
Oh, definitely.
Well worth the tragedy that you had to go through.
Oh, fantastic. Now, we seem to be missing any two-player games on this, and the PlayStation Mini Classic is going to supposedly come with 2 controllers, so I better throw some game in there that has 2 players, right?
Yep, makes sense. Makes sense to definitely have multiple people play a game and enjoy the fun together.
Well, after the success of Mario Kart, particularly Mario Kart 64, kart clones appeared left, right, and centre. But I think nothing did it finer than Crash Team Racing. A game that, controversial hot take here, and I'm glad Jem isn't in the booth with me, I found Crash Team Racing to be superior to Mario Kart 64.
Wow, this is a big call.
It had a single-player story mode, which I'm always a sucker for. Diddy Kong Racing on the 64 had that as well, but I just liked the flow of the racing in Crash Team Racing. The characters were probably half garbage. I liked playing as Dr. N. Jin, who had the rocket sticking out of his head.
Yes.
He had a sort of a half metally, half human voice because he was partly roboticized, I think.
Roboticized.
Well, possibly. But in later years, I found a newfound appreciation for Dr. Neocortex.
Ah, yes. Neocortex. I mean, we could even talk about Crash Bandicoot, but given that game has recently, I think it was last year, re-released on the PlayStation 4, we don't need to put that on the Mini here. But Crash Team Racing, I think, would be a nice way to bring an element of multiplayer as well as a fun game with Crash being, let's face it, kind of the poster boy.
Yeah, sort of the unofficial mascot of the PlayStation here. Everyone needed a mascot. Sega had Sonic. Nintendo obviously had Mario. What does Sony have? Crash Bandicoot. Yes. He'll do.
And a bit of Aussie flavour, if you will.
Oh, don't worry. There was Dingo Dials and Komodo Joes and all sorts of... Do we have Komodo dragons in Australia?
In zoos. Komodo Joe. That is a wrestling name right there, is it not?
That's fantastic. One aspect I liked about the Crash Team Racing dynamics is that in Mario, especially the Mario Kart on Super Nintendo, I think you can pick up coins, which I don't even know if they really did much. Maybe they gave you a minor speed boost.
I think they gave you a little bit of speed boost, yeah.
Okay, well, in Crash Team Racing, you could pick up 10 Wumpa Fruit, and if you could hold on to 10, it boosted your weapon powers.
Ooh.
So, for example, the equivalent of the blue shell, which was basically just a warp orb, would target the first player. But if you had 10 Wumpa Fruit, it would hit every other racer in ahead of you.
That is impactful.
Before it hits the person in front. So I just liked it. I liked the level designs. I liked the fact that it introduced the concept of jumping at the top of a jump.
Ah, yes.
And the higher you got, the more boost you got when you hit the ground. And that was introduced in many kart races after the fact, but I liked that. You still had your classic grind, like sliding boost as well.
The jump turn. Yeah.
Fantastic. Crash Team Racing has to make the cut. That's one of the games that I'm like, we're talking about what we would add. I sincerely hope that Crash Team Racing actually makes it on. I'll play it again.
Are you listening, Sony?
Please listen.
Oh, seriously. Please subscribe.
I mean, Sony's a big company. It would help our numbers.
That would do wonders.
We're promoting their product right now. Surely they could scratch our back too.
That's allowed, right? Where we can say the name Sony, right? We don't have to like bleep out every time we say Sony, do we?
I was tempted to bleep you when we edit it. So what's next, my good friend?
Well, this one is one of my favourites. I know you probably didn't get to play this one too much, if at all.
I have to admit, I did not. I was not on the stealth boat at this time.
The second game that I had on PlayStation after Gran Turismo was a game called Tenshu, Stealth Assassins. Essentially, you play as a ninja. It's got, I think, 10 levels. Mm-hmm. So each individual level, you would have a task to do. It might be to assassinate a certain person, or it might be to rescue someone. So I guess it was kind of like a hitman, but you were a ninja set in ancient Japan. You had the sword, the ninja stars, those sorts of things. Loved this game because it was built on stealth. You could play it by running out and just trying to hack everyone with your sword, but it was made a lot harder. Best way to get through this game was to sneak through and kill your opponents undetected for that stealth kill. Made things a lot easier.
Up until this point in gaming history, there really were no stealth games, and this is where they started to emerge. Although maybe they were around, we just didn't see them beforehand.
Yeah, they were very good at what they did and snuck past us.
Yeah, this is another example of a series that I'd sort of heard of at the time, but the only way you could really know about if a game was good or not was usually from your friends or a specific review in a magazine, or you had the opportunity to hire it from a video store. Without that, we didn't have YouTube videos and things like that showing you the gameplay. You had no way of knowing how things played. The PS1 did have the advantage that it could do demo discs.
Yes.
And
if you purchase certain magazines, you would sometimes get those demo discs and be able to go, I've heard about this one. Let's see if I like it before I commit to paying the money for it up front.
Yeah, but remind everyone how old we were when the PlayStation was running rampant.
We were in our early teens, so we weren't exactly full of money to be able to purchase these games.
Flushed with cash. It was not happening back then. Definitely not. So this is another game that missed me on the first time around the roundabout, but hopefully I can snatch it up this time.
And let's face it, any game that you can throw poisoned rice from a rooftop to the floor and have some dude go and eat it and then be coughing up only for you to drop behind him and give him a little...
Well, remind me not to eat floor rice when I go
you should
in
never
my Japan travels.
Never eat floor rice. Yes, be mindful of the fugu fish as well.
You're listening to the Gaming Lovers Podcast. Want to join the conversation? Visit thegaminglovers.com. Record your comment or question by clicking on the button on the right-hand side. And you could be featured in the next podcast.
The next game would be one for the sports fans. We haven't covered any of the sports games, and there are many that have come out over the years. As I said earlier, EA Sports was probably my favourite type.
I've heard it's in the game.
Oh, it is in the game. And what better one to go with than probably the highest selling sports game series than FIFA. Now, these games would come out every single year, so any year could really be chosen. We're going to pick FIFA 98 because it was a World Cup year.
Oh, that makes sense.
And I know that they would release World Cup games as well, but FIFA 98 would have had that build-up. You had all of the superstars at that time. There was Ronaldo, there was Beckham had just come on the scene. FIFA 98, I think would be a good addition to get on this mini PlayStation. Again, another multiplayer game, or you could play it on your own. But FIFA 98, I think, would be a good addition to the 20 games that are coming out on this console.
Yes, I agree completely with everything you said because I, too, understand the rules of soccer.
Yes, it is a soccer game.
Well, FIFA is another one that always makes the top lists of people's favourite PlayStation 1 games. You're you like the football.
I do like the football.
And so you gave it your rubber stamp of approval.
Yes.
And I trust your opinion. I think you know what the people want.
I think I do know what the people want.
Well, I know what I want. And so I'm going to hijack the reins again for a game that I know you have played as well. A game that haunted my memories for a little while. There's no shortage of survival horror games that emerged at the start of the PlayStation 1 era. Dino Crisis, Resident Evil we've talked about, but how could we not complete the unholy trinity with Silent Hill?
Yes, Silent Hill. What a creepy game.
Now, this was a game that didn't rely so much on jump scares. There are a few. That bloody cat in the locker in the school always got me. But this is a game that sort of creeped you out more than it flat out scared you.
It gave you your hair would be standing on end on the back of your neck, just walking through, and just some of the sounds that you would hear in the school or even in the hospital. And even just if you had your radio on,
Yes.
which would detect some of the mutant
grotesque creatures that are coming for you. You would think having an early warning system would help put your mind at ease.
Yes.
But instead of deafening silence, you instead get a crackling static, which slowly almost sounds like just a blaring sort of alarmish sort of...
It would definitely make you tense.
You knew an enemy was coming. The draw distance in this game was so limited, you didn't know if it was still ahead of you. Maybe if it was beyond 10 feet in front of you, you couldn't tell. It could be coming from behind you. It could be coming from the hallway that your back is to. Oh my goodness, where is it? Very tricky.
And at times in that game, you're running through the streets, which are very foggy. You have very limited visibility. It could come out of anywhere, even from the sky.
Oh, yes, those stupid flapping pterodactyls. Pterodactyls. But this is an example where Konami used the limitations of the PlayStation graphically to their advantage and made the draw distance quite short. So it did look foggy outdoors. It looked foggy indoors, but it added to the claustrophobic feel. You couldn't quite tell what was coming at you. But the complexity of the characters and the setting and the fact that you are surrounded by what appears to be a normal school or a normal hospital, like you said, but then you'll trigger something in it and suddenly an air raid siren will start and you'll faint and wake up and the walls where they were lovely plaster have been replaced with barbed wire and rust replaces the floor and everything just becomes a alternate other world.
I had no idea what was going on when that first happened. I was like, what has happened to this place? Am I dreaming? Is this real? What am I to do here?
Still one of my favourite, most impactful introduction sequences ever. Harry Mason, who's in town on vacation.
Harry Mason.
That's an in-joke. There was someone who made a remix of a line of dialogue and put it to a beat. So he's like, my name's Harry Mason. Harry Mason. My name's Harry Mason. I'm in town on vacation. My name's Harry Mason. I'm in town on vacation. So we still say that anytime we're in town on vacation. But Harry Mason loses his daughter, so you sort of follow her through the streets after a car crash. You sort of catch glimpses of her in the distance. You follow the figure that you think's the daughter and you head down an alleyway and things start getting a bit dark and grim and gloomy, and then you start taking a few more corners and again 3D environments so the camera can sweep down in disorientating sort of perspectives, and then you realize that there's monsters in the area and the way out has been shut behind you and there's corpses hanging on rusty fences and you're panicking, you don't have any weapons. Oh my goodness, I'm going to die, I've been killed.
Yes, this game definitely made you tense. The weaponry in this game, though, was quite a little bit different to that of Resident Evil.
Indeed. Melee weapons.
Yes. So Resident Evil, you had, you were a policeman if you played as Leon.
Mm-hmm.
You had your gun, your handgun, and you would pick up guns, shotguns, and bullets and stuff along the way. However, in Silent Hill, you had to be a little bit more creative. Perhaps pick up a crowbar. Later in the game, I think you get a chainsaw.
No.
They definitely do the trick.
Oh,
Definitely
no
do
doubt.
the trick, but a lot more close quarters combat.
Yeah, after
involved in
being
this
so
one.
used to using nothing but handguns, shotguns, rifles, this, that, rocket launchers in other games, suddenly you're only equipped with a lead pipe in some Silent Hill games, and you're like, I need something better than this. I'm in trouble. Silent Hill's a good one. Let's go. Oh, that was a bit dark and grim. Let's go for something a bit lighter.
Of course. One of my personal favourites, that of Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
My goodness, nothing hit the boom like good old Tony Hawk and his pro skating games.
Oh, yeah. Probably in the summer of 99. And, yep, I even bought a skateboard.
Ah, who says video games don't influence kids?
And if you know anything about me, is that I should not have wheels attached to my feet under any circumstances. So my skateboarding ability was quite limited. In fact, I think I looked better holding the skateboard under my arm than I did standing on it. But this game was fantastic. I didn't know anything about skateboarding, but after playing that game, I knew all of the name of the moves, all the names of the different grinds.
Oh, different grinds.
And the best part about playing this game, if you did mess up a grind and fall on a handrail, you didn't have the pain that you would have if you were doing it out on the street.
It's much safer alternative to real skateboarding.
Absolutely.
Who needs fitness?
Well, let me tell you, falling on a handrail, legs either side, is definitely not my idea of good exercise.
That's not good for anyone.
That game, though, definitely made skating a very popular activity at the time. It had good soundtrack, good skater-type music, and I remember one day playing this game. My parents had gone out for the evening, so I was, going to be at home playing video games all night. And I was determined to do this amazing multiplier move that involved backflips and grinds and ollies and stuff on the grind, and then backflip at the end, landing on another grind, and it was incredible. It took me hours and hours, but I finally nailed this move, and I did record it on a VCR. Put the tape in, hit record. First time recording myself play a video game. Much easier to do it now, of course. I'm going to see if I can find this old tape and then try and see if I can find a VCR somewhere in the world.
Oh, I've got a VCR.
Oh,
don't you worry.
We have a VCR?
When it comes to technology, I rarely get rid of anything.
Because
sometimes I feel a little bit like my father, who is prone to collect junk. But there's no shame in that if it's going to have a use. And if you can supply me with your Tony Hawk trick on a VHS tape, let me tell you, I got the VCR to play it.
Well, if we can find it, maybe we can upload this onto one of your social media pages or something, and perhaps you can see just how good this move was. I'm talking it up a bit, but I feel that this might have been top quality, world record setting maneuvering.
That's awfully confident. of you.
I'm calling it. It's a big call,
We got
but
proof.
I can almost guarantee no one else will have proof that they can beat this score.
You've also brought up something quite fun that I've forgotten completely about, is that I used to actually record on VHS quite a few of my gaming achievements. I did some of my Resident Evil 2 runs with no saves, no first aid sprays, and I would record them on VHS. And I tried my darndest to beat Resident Evil 3 using only a knife. Now, we talked about how painful the nemesis is harassing you, and you are forced to fight him in at least 2 key sections, maybe 3, where combat is unavoidable. But 2 of them have gimmicks. One of them you can attack a acid hose that spills on him. The other one you can just ignore him until you get the giant railgun charged and
Yes.
blast him to oblivion. But one of them you actually have to legit fight him. Now, I taped over that section of my tape probably about 48 times because every time I would try it, I would tape over it in case I got it that time.
Yes.
And then I didn't, so I'd have to rewind my tape and tape over it again. The quality of that section takes a massive dip compared to the rest of the tape, let me tell you.
Well, you had to record those things because no one would believe you that you were able to complete a run of Resident Evil 3 with just a combat knife.
If I told you that, you would not believe me.
No way. So that was our way of preserving and proving to our friends that we weren't just making up stories about how good we were. But, man, we put ourselves through a lot of pain just to get that.
And as another sidebar, how precious were your 100% save files on your memory cards? You would never delete them.
Memory card management was a big thing on the PlayStation. I had 2 in the end, but for a long time I had 1. Where you get, 15 save slots?
15 blocks. Yep.
And yeah, some games you were never deleting that block. So if you had 5 or 6 of them, you start to limit yourself of what you can play, what you can save, and eventually you have to make the tough call. But I've got to delete you.
My mother asked me once, if this house was on fire, what would the first thing you grab? And I said the PlayStation 1 memory cards. She was horrified. I'm like, you don't understand. I've got all epilogues unlocked in Resident Evil 3. I've got my Metal Gear Solid save file where I've unlocked the Spider-Man looking suit for the ninja. I've got my, Final Fantasy 8 save with all of my triple triad cards. I'm not wasting that.
I borrowed your memory card once so I could read the epilogues on Resident Evil 3. And it didn't work because I had an NTSC copy of the game. So you had the PAL version, of course, and I was unable to read them. So I had to borrow your whole PlayStation.
Those were the days, my friend.
So what's next on our list?
Well, next I put one in that you have absolutely no experience with, and it's something I've wanted to play, but it is basically impossible within the region of Australia. I'm a big fan of the Persona series. I specifically bought a PlayStation Vita to play the Persona series. Now, on that, I could play Persona 1, Persona 2, Persona 3, and Persona 4, which was all that was out at the time. One thing I didn't realise is that Persona 2 is actually 2 separate games. Persona 2 Innocent Sin and Persona 2 Eternal Punishment. It's a duology.
Ooh. Not
a trilogy, a duology. I think that's the word for it. It's what I'm calling it. So the problem is...
Biology?
Biology is something different. So the problem is the PS Vita had the PSP version of Persona 2 Innocent Sin. Try to keep up
That
with
is
me
a lot
here.
of Ps.
Yes. PS Vita had a PSP port of Persona 2 Innocent Sin. But Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, only got a PSP port in Japan. It also had its original version on the PS1, which was not released in Australia. Now, the only way I can access that is if I make a US PlayStation account, which involves either formatting or buying a new Vita memory card, which ain't cheap, to trick my console into thinking it's American.
Yep.
Or downloading it on a PlayStation 3, again with an American profile. Now, that's not what I like to do. I like to keep things legit, get things legally however I can.
Support the developers for the hard work that they do. So this is a bit of a personal interest for you that you would love.
It is. Persona is one of my favourite series. Admittedly, the tone of the series shifts from 3 onwards, and that's what I really love. But Persona 2 was pretty great plot-wise, and the fact that I only got to experience half of it still eats me up at times. So it's already been localised. It's all in English. It just hasn't been released worldwide.
So was it released in North America?
It was.
Okay. So, yeah, there's definitely a market for it if it was released in North America. Unfortunately, it just didn't come out to our shores.
Yeah, so what better time? It's already in English. Persona is more popular than ever. I think that Persona 2 Eternal Punishment will not likely be, but should be on the PlayStation Mini Classic, if only to satisfy my hunger.
I'm interested to see when it does come out, to see how many we got right.
Well, we're going to go for 15 out of 15.
Ooh.
It's ambitious.
I'm hoping to get 3. I'm setting the bar low.
Now, the next game on our list we have oh so fond memories about. You and I were staying at a friend's house late high school. We decided to film a media movie at the crack of dawn. So we thought, well, we've got to kill some time. What could we do? And there was a game that you and I both had separate experience with.
Yes.
And that game was Driver 2.
Yes. I was a big fan of the driver games, completely different to your Gran Turismo type car game.
Mm-hmm.
This was a mission-based game. And with the second one, I had played it up until a certain point and I got stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd stopped playing it for about, I reckon, maybe a month or two on the night that you were bringing up. And I remember I kept thinking, oh, this is the level I got up to. I couldn't get past this one.
Yeah, we'd both had missions that we'd gotten stuck on, and it had been a while since we'd both played it because this was several years after it came out. Driver 2 had so many different improvements over the first game. You could actually exit the car and steal another car if you want. Fantastic.
Yes.
But
Was
there
it
was
Michael Douglas? The character was Michael Douglas, wasn't it?
the character's name was Tanner.
Yeah, I'm sure it was based, like the facial structure was Michael Douglas.
Oh, his facial structure on the PS1 was probably just a block.
Wasn't there a character that looked like the guy that was in CSI? I'm sure it was based on him.
So Driver 2, we're playing at a friend's house and we get up to the mission that Mr. Steve guarantees. This is the one I could never get past. Let's do it. Let's get past it.
And man, we got past it.
After a few goes, bam! Between our skills combined, we were on a hot streak. We did it. And then the next mission started, and you said...
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, this is the one I got up to. No, this is the one.
So we struggle a little bit. We achieve that mission. High fives all around. And then the next mission...
Oh, wait, no, I've done this one too. No, this must be the last one I got up to.
We have quite fond memories. We ended up beating the entire game quickly after we stayed at that friend's house.
We did, yeah.
So we hit a roadblock and we barreled straight past it. There was one mission as well that we did fail because there was a person in the boot of the car. You're on train tracks. You've got to escape and make it to the objective marker before the train hits you. And that's fine, but you're on a time limit. Now, we escaped the train and was safe as the train went past, but we were still a meter from the objective marker.
The red arrow that would be pointing down on where you had to get to. If you weren't there, you didn't complete the mission. Never mind that the guy in the back is fine. You failed.
Safety be darned. You didn't make it to the objective marker. You failed that mission.
I gave you clear instructions to get here. These coordinates. If you didn't get there, that's a fail.
Now, like I said, Driver 2 we found to be so much superior to the first game. The first game, a lot of people never got past the introduction because it had the checklist of things you had to do.
In the car park.
The multi-story car park. You had to do like a reverse 180. You had to do a slalom. I didn't even know what a slalom was. I asked my dad, what's a slalom? He's like, those skiers around the flags. I'm like, the poles. Perfect. Yeah, you had to do a burnout, you had to brake right near a wall, you had to do all these different things within a time limit. And so many people apparently never got past that mission. That was their driver experience.
So they never got to see the answering machine that would leave a message for you for your next mission.
No.
Let alone the final mission on that, though, was impossible on Driver 1.
Something about a president?
You were like getting rammed by cars everywhere. I never was able to finish that one without using some sort of cheat code.
There were cheat codes for that because that's the only way I beat that mission too. Maybe we should boot it up and see if we can do it.
Well, if Sony are listening and they bring Driver, we would like Driver 2 for the memories, but if it's Driver on this console, perhaps we can give it a try.
It was quite innovative. Grand Theft Auto had yet to make the jump to 3D, so it was sort of your first 3D car mission-based game, and I loved it.
And you had areas based on cities like San Francisco, so you had the hills and you could be driving off the road and get that airborne and then that bounce like you'd see in the movies, which eventually was another thing that you could do in that game was the editing of a movie.
Yes,
like
Driver
you could
3.
Put the car chases and things like that into like a movie editor type thing and create your own video.
It was not on the PlayStation, but on the original Xbox, I had Driver 3 and had no shortage of amusing videos that I would make in my spare time, trapping poor, innocent motorists on a drawbridge that I would then promptly activate and send them, because the drawbridge went up so quickly, it would catapult them into the sky. People would be running for their lives.
The hydraulics on that thing was amazing.
It would also extend as it went up, so
Yes,
it could
it
stay
did.
connected. There were some errors in that, let's just say that. But yeah, definitely Driver. It did break ground. I think it's a memorable enough entry that it could take up a spot on the PlayStation Mini Classic.
Absolutely. And that was when I first realized how creative you were, because you'd only have about 6 or 7 characters to create a title for your videos. I don't know how you did it, but you managed to use 7 characters to describe a very funny situation.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. What else do we have on our PlayStation wish list?
Well, as we moving on from driving type game to a little bit more of I guess not so much a shooter game. It would be an adventure game where you had guns. Everyone loves guns and things like that. But this game had a bit of a story to it as well. It's called Siphon Filter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, many people, because Siphon Filter came out around the same time as Metal Gear Solid, there was a bit of a divide whether you were a Siphon Filter type gamer or a Metal Gear Solid. I actually really liked Siphon Filter. It had a good storyline about it. It was mission based, so you had like levels to go through. You had, a wide range of arsenal. That's not the right word. That's not the right use of the term
A wide
arsenal.
A wide use of arsenal.
You had you had an arsenal that you could call upon.
No shortage of
No
tools.
shortage of tools and weaponry to get your job done. And I really enjoyed it. I think it was one of the first games that I can recall that had the headshot. So if there was an enemy there that you needed to take down, why not do it in one shot?
Well, that makes sense because I believe Siphon Filter was influenced by the Nintendo 64's GoldenEye, which also featured headshots. So that would be on the money, a bit more spy, gadgets, things like that.
Yep.
As opposed to just your standard shooter. Now, Siphon Filter, it's confession time. I've never actually played Siphon Filter. I may actually be on record as far as friendships go, saying that I had, because you know how it is when you're awkward and you're in high school and people say, "Oh, have you played Siphon Filter?" and you're like, "Yeah, I loved it, man."
Just don't ask me any other further questions.
I can't remember the character's name or what my favourite mission is. Oh, my favourite mission's the third one. I loved that one. Just something about it just clicked for me. You know how it is. You didn't want to be left out. You didn't want to be
Absolutely
looked upon as inferior because you hadn't played something. There was only so many dollars in the bank for the gaming budget, so...
And at that time, it was slim pickings for us. We didn't have
Seriously.
a lot of money to go and buy every game that had come out.
So look,
That's where you having friends that you could borrow games from was very important. Because I didn't own Siphon Filter. I borrowed that off a friend and played through it. And I think it was like the 3rd level that
Yes.
actually got me hooked on this game.
Yeah, so did I, but my friend's copy was scratched, so it didn't all work, so I don't remember anything from it.
Oh, yes. You played it. You put it in.
Well, I'm looking forward to if that makes the cut, and that's the sort of game that I think will. I don't think there'll be any issues because that series is pretty much dead at the moment. There's no
Yep.
plans to continue it, so there shouldn't be any issues getting the rights to use it. And if it comes out, I promise that I will play in its entirety Siphon Filter.
The game was definitely popular enough to have a number of sequels. So it definitely had a fan base. I think it would be a good addition.
Excellent.
And this time you can play it and not have to confess 20 years
I
later.
don't have time to play games anymore. I'll lie my teeth off to try and pretend. Add it to the gaming backlog.
Gaming goals.
Not in this episode, or not yet anyway. Look, we said that we would try not to have any sequels from series on here, but there's one game that I have a bone to pick with Squaresoft, or Square Enix, or whatever they're called these days. Final Fantasy VII is already been announced to be on it, and not only will it be on the PlayStation Mini Classic, it has been announced that Final Fantasy 7, 9, 12, a lot of them are making their way to the Switch and other consoles, right? They're getting new life on new things. You can play a lot of them on your smartphones these days. You can play them on the PlayStation Vita, for example. Where's the love for Final Fantasy VIII? It's suspicious by its absence. Why did Final Fantasy VIII not make the cut to the Switch?
What did they do? What did number 8 do to just annoy everyone that it would not get a chance?
Well, Final Fantasy VIII was my first Final Fantasy game. It has
So it's got a special place in your
a
heart.
very special place. I played it maybe 2.5, maybe even 3 times through, which I can't really say I've done with any other Final Fantasy except for maybe 10. But I played through one entire session, one entire run, just to get every card from its collectible story. It's a love story. I mean, look, I'm a sensitive guy. I can appreciate a good love story, and I really enjoy Final Fantasy VIII. Final Fantasy VIII seems to be a game that gets shunned a bit in the Final Fantasy series. I understand Final Fantasy is not your field of expertise, but look, it was an important thing. It introduced me to the world of Final Fantasy and probably Japanese RPGs, which are now like my favorite genre. And the thing that caught my eye with Final Fantasy VIII is that there was a magazine in Australia called Hyper.
Yes, I am familiar with Hyper Magazine.
Yep, I used to get them fairly regularly, and every now and again they would release a Hyper Game Guides edition, and it would have guides for, 5 or 6 games, a bunch of cheat codes at the back, a few posters in there. It's like a special edition.
Yep.
And I would get them because I wanted the posters, primarily. But I would also read through the walkthroughs, and it was almost like a novel, right? You could visualize, wow, this game sounds incredible. I mean, you got this boss fight, it's got different weaknesses. You got to go and talk to different characters and learn stuff about what's happening. This sounds incredible. This sounds like something I'd enjoy. And that was how I got introduced to Final Fantasy VIII, which in turn, I've played, Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4. I've not played 5. I've played 6, 7, 8, 9. As you can see, it triggered me to start playing an entire series. Why on earth is Final Fantasy VIII excluded? I demand justice for Final Fantasy VIII. Squall deserves better.
Squall.
Squall.
No, thank you. I was trying to think of what the character's name was. Squall.
Oh, man. It's so funny because everyone hates him as a protagonist because he's moody and he's brooding and he's silent, and someone will say something and he'll say whatever. He's like, everyone accuses him of having no personality, but he actually is just...
It's my kind of guy. Sounds like me.
He's been through some stuff and he doesn't deal well in a social environment. And, as an awkward teenager growing up, the more you learn about him, the more you're like, this guy is kind of cool. He's not just a dork who doesn't want to talk to the chicks who are trying to hit on him. He's cool. I like him, and he has a scar across his forehead, so that's always a +2 in the cool factor.
And did he not have like a sword that looked like the handle was like a rifle?
Hot diggity dog. He had a gun blade.
That's the
Imagine
one.
a revolver with a large knife off the end of it. And that was cool because if you used that to attack and you pushed R1 at the point of impact, it would do extra damage.
Perfect.
Sublime.
So they've committed to 7.
Well, they've 7. 7's the golden child. Everyone loves 7. 7 almost annoys me because everyone loves it, but I've played 7 a lot. No mistakes there. But Final Fantasy 7's being remade in an episodic format. It's going to have its time in the sun. It doesn't need to be on the PlayStation Mini. Give something else a chance. And knowing my luck, Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy 9 will probably be on the PlayStation Mini Classic, and 8 will be shunned again.
Oh, poor 8. We need a support page. Something online.
Hashtag justice for FF8.
We're all for Squall.
All for Squall. That's a much better hashtag than what I picked. And finally, to round out the 20 games, they picked 5, we're picking 15. What else could be last? If you know us, which we do...
It's got to be Gex, doesn't it?
Oh, Gex! I'd actually forgotten about Gex.
No,
I had quite a few Gex games.
I had Gex Deep Undercover or something?
Deep Cover Gecko.
Deep Cover Gecko, that's what it was.
They had movie parodies. There was
Yeah.
Oh, actually, that's quite a
I
fine
don't
one.
think Gex is going to get the gig.
Doesn't matter. I've got a copy of it in my PlayStation 1 at this very moment.
Oh.
Deep cover gecko. Guarantee you. I'll go and show you later. I'm not even kidding. But no. Poor Gex didn't quite make the cut. He was option number 21.
We went for a different type of amphibian snake. No,
No, they're not amphibians. It's a reptile, not an amphibian. They're half water livers.
We went for a different type of scaly creature.
Good to say reptile.
Snake.
Exactamundo. We picked Metal Gear Solid to round it out. How could we not? Probably the greatest PlayStation game in my opinion.
100% agree with you there. My favourite game of all time and my favourite series of all time. Well, sorry, I wouldn't say my favourite game of all time is the one on the PlayStation, but my favourite PlayStation game.
Yeah,
Definitely.
PS1 game.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, nothing I'd ever played had that cinematic element to it before where, you know, you've got the introduction playing and it's showing different camera angles and you're getting the briefing on the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the screen it says, you know, directed by such and such. And, you know, lead voice director,
Yes.
such and such. You're like, what is this? We've got
Watching
credits.
a movie. I'm playing a movie. Interactive in a sense that you have the ability to go here and there, and you had a wide arsenal again.
Oh, no shortage
Mini
of
weaponry.
Arsenal.
Arsenal gear.
Different game.
Yes,
different
that
game.
that was not in the first one, but I had to get it out there.
This was another game that I got introduced by the same series of guidebooks. I was reading about Metal Gear Solid, seeing the different boss fights. Every boss fight had a different strategy to it. And just reading and just going, this is incredible. We've got remote control missiles. We've got invisible ninjas. We've got a helicopter. There's so much in this game. That
Can we
sounds
pause
incredible.
there and go play it again? Sounds amazing. I'd heard about this game well before, I think it even hit our shores. I think it obviously had come out in Japan and North America before Australia, so it was in all of the magazines. This is the game that you need to play. So I'd heard so much about it, and like I said before, there was a lot of people that were either Siphon Filter or Metal Gear Solid. I was playing Siphon Filter when Metal Gear Solid came out in Australia, so I didn't jump onto it as quickly as others. But once I had heard from others, this is the game you've got to play, I did play it and I did love it. I love being able to just call people up.
I know.
I need help. I'm stuck. What do I do?
You don't have to actually call a friend in real life because you can call your support crew in the game. Now, this is a game that had far more dialogue in its actual plot and optional dialogue. I'd never seen this much talking before. Some people find that to be a detriment, but I absolutely loved it. You can keep calling the same person and get more of their backstory, get more of the character development, more about the area that you're in. What can we learn about this Alaska?
For me, when I'm playing a game, sometimes it's not about getting it done and putting it on the shelf again. For me, it's kind of like the journey.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could stretch it out a little bit further, like there were some games I would play, I'm getting too far through this game too quickly. I don't have another game to play next. I'm going to take my time. So a game like Metal Gear Solid where you could search different areas, you could call different people and ask them question after question after question, get their story. I thought that was amazing. And yes, I'm the type of person like you, loved that cinematic type. You know what? There's a cutscene. Put the controller down, sit and try your best to understand what's going on.
There's some complexities, some spontaneous heart attacks are happening all too conveniently. What is going on here? There's a man who apparently is also Snake. What is happening here? But yeah, calling people with a boss fight, you can call your commander to get information because they used to be part of your unit. So he knows all their backstory. He knows all their things like that. You can call your combat specialist to learn survival tactics in that arena that you're fighting in. Try doing this. He has a blind spot because he has this weakness. Things like that. You could, and then let us not forget, this is also the game that introduced both of us to the, insane and creative brain of Hideo Kojima.
Absolutely. He definitely has a weird sense of humor, but He's a bit of a genius. We have called him Hideo Kagenius before.
This is the sort of game where you can repeatedly call the person who saves your game and refuse to save. And after the 6th time, she'll basically not stop taking your calls. So you can't save your game because you've just ticked off the person who you're supposed to save through. This is the sort of game where you've got like wild wolves in one area. And there's a woman who's been feeding them on the enemy team. And so her scent they like. And if you beat her, you get her handkerchief so they don't attack you. You can also punch one of your allies and hide in a cardboard box, and she'll command the wolves to pee on the box, which you can then wear, and they won't attack you because you smell like one of them.
Just those sorts of weird things that I'd never seen before, like even knocking on the wall to attract one of your enemies to come forward to the noise, where you could run around them. If you wanted to, you could attack them. If you didn't want to, you could just run right past them, and perhaps that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah, the game of cat and mouse with the enemies. If you got spotted, you would obviously try to avoid it as long as you could, but if you got spotted, you would have an alert, you'd lose your mini-map, and you would have to frantically break line of sight, whether that meant killing the guard that just saw you before reinforcements come and try to get out of the way, hide under something or behind something, and then they would be actively looking for you, and then it would pass, and everyone goes back to their patrol routes. The music calms down again. Yep. Just everything about it just fit just perfectly with the theming, the music, the voice acting, the settings, the graphics, the cast, the characters, everything.
Here's a little story for you. I think you guys talked about it on one of your podcasts in the past about that the game cover would have a codec frequency on the back that you would use to call someone up. When I borrowed the game, I didn't have that. I don't know how. I must have borrowed it just in a blank CD case or something. I didn't actually have that cover. And I didn't know what else to do, so I went through every single frequency until it worked. So I was sitting there going 140.0, no, 140.1, no, 140.2, and so on and so forth until I got it right.
Little quirks like that. You've got Psycho Mantis boss fight, which we've mentioned in the past on this podcast as well, that makes you think outside the box a little.
Makes you think with the other side of your brain.
This is the sort of game where you would have, tips and tricks in the back of a magazine or in the guidebook editions, like I told you. And certain games would have like 3 things, or how to unlock hard difficulty, beat the game on normal, and that's it for that game. The Metal Gear Solid section went on for like half a page because it had all this weird stuff in it. Things that you could use to avoid certain boss fights, to, get weapons early by doing certain things, how to make weird stuff happen. Like if you chase a woman who's disguised as a soldier into the bathroom quick enough, she doesn't get enough time to change completely, and the next cutscene she will not be wearing pants. Stupid things like that.
Now, I know you confessed something earlier. It's my confession time.
Uh-oh.
When I first played Metal Gear Solid, I tapped out to the torture, meaning Meryl died.
You surrendered.
I surrendered.
On your canonical first playthrough.
Yes. I could not tap the button rapidly enough, and I submitted to that torture.
Oh, big point of division in that game. You do get captured and put in a torture rack. Revolver Ocelot does directly say to you, there are no continues, my friend, at this point. So if you're going to fail, you're going back to your last save point, which could be an hour ago in this game. You don't want that. And he also mentions that you can't use rapid-fire controllers. I don't know why he has to say that to Snake. But
well, I did have a rapid-fire controller on the Super Nintendo and on Mortal Kombat when you had your test your might.
Oh, just flick the switch and
you're done. The switch, I could break through like granite with my bare fist. So, yes, I can understand that. That's another thing that they just had thought of.
Mm-hmm. They would register that every button press would be perfectly timed equally, and that means you're cheating. So, no, we're not accepting that. You're going to die.
Yep.
Little things that they've thought of. Every little quirk that you could think of in this game, it had already been thought of. There's certain situations where you have card keys and you're like, there's 3 card keys, I've only got 1, what do I have to do with it? Then when you figure out what you have to do with the card key to actually unlock the other 2 things, you're like, oh my goodness, who thinks of this? This is incredible.
Putting C4 on the wall that looked freshly painted or something to break open a hole in the wall to be able to access other areas. I think you mentioned it before, remote control missiles. It just had so many things that no other game had.
Yeah.
And the series just got better and better on future consoles.
Every edition of the Metal Gear Solid games was cutting edge graphically. It had cutting edge gameplay. Everything got improved every time. The story got more convoluted and crazy at times, but that's what you're on board for. But Metal Gear Solid was definitely groundbreaking at the time. It spearheaded the stealth revolution that would lead on to games like Splinter Cell. And every other game seemed to have a stealth section after the success of Metal Gear Solid. You can't play a game for half an hour without running into a stealth section at times. But we definitely think that Metal Gear Solid is among the highest echelon of PS1 games and therefore rounds out our selection of our PS1 mini classic games.
For me, it's a lock. I'll be surprised if it's not on there. But then again, you know what? Surprise me. No, don't surprise
Don't
me.
surprise me, please.
Don't
do not
surprise me.
We know you're listening, Sony. We mentioned you earlier.
Yes, we do know that you're one of our listeners, Sony.
Well, thank you very much for taking this wonderful trip of nostalgia with me, talking about these old games. I am horribly easily impressioned to want to replay games, and so you have just basically locked in my schedule for the rest of the year.
It is that paradox, is it? I don't know if you'd call it a paradox, but when we were 14, 15, we had time. We had all the time in the world. We were in early high school. We didn't have the pressure of exams or work. If we did our chores, we could then go play games until our heart was content. We didn't have the money to pay for all of the games that we wanted.
Oh, I got the money now. I got the
our lives
money.
have flipped. We have the money. We don't have the time.
Or sometimes you have the time, you don't have the energy. The wonders of aging. Now, before we wrap up, let's do a little special edition of Gaming Goals.
Gaming goals.
See, I knew that singing our own intros would catch on. Mr. Steve, what are you playing at the moment? What have you got your eyes on in the near future?
I am currently working on getting 4 stars in each of the levels of Overcooked 2.
Now, that's an ambitious undertaking.
Boy, we have done the first 3 levels, and man, the jump between 3-star to 4-star is incredible. We were quietly confident thinking that we would have already scored enough points to get 4 stars.
Nowhere near.
Not the case. So that's one that me and Mel will be working on, and that might take a bit of time. There's, a good 40 levels
Yeah, well, the original game
to get
launches...
4 stars on.
The original game launched with 3 stars being the hardest, and some of those levels would take, 4 or 5 goes to get that. Usually it wouldn't be too much. But they decided, hey, you guys want more? You want the extra challenge? Let's make a new game plus with a 4-star difficulty. And boy, howdy, do they set that bar high.
Yeah. There is some add-on content which has just been released. The Surf and Turf.
Ooh, sounds delicious.
It does sound delicious. And
is that pig's feet and jellyfish?
That might be also on our future gaming goals. But we might try the 4 stars first, then jump back maybe into that add-on.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still waiting for the rematch.
Oh, look,
the Overcooked 2 rematch. We might have to wait till you get back from Japan, although you might have an advantage now that you know how to make sushi better.
Oh, look, I'm there to study. I'm there to learn. Nothing but culinary study for me in Japan.
The other one that I'm considering getting soon is perhaps Hitman 2.
Another game that we have a long history of.
Oh,
we became friends over Hitman 2 many years ago.
Perhaps in the future when they are releasing a PlayStation 2 classic, we can discuss perhaps the games that we would love to see on that console. But yeah, Hitman, a lot of fun. Different ways to go about the end goal, the end result. much like what Tenchu was back on the PlayStation. So that one's another one I'll be looking out for.
Superb. Well, once again, thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Do you have a word to sign off with? Because I've been forbidden from using Bayonara anymore. There's been some conflict over that in the past, so I'm going to stick to my Chowski. Do you have anything of yourself to...
It sounds like it's a bit of a international flavour. We've got Bayonara, Chowski. Sounds, I don't know, Polish? I might just say, adios, muchachos.
Chowski.
Thanks for listening to the Gaming Lovers Podcast. For more episodes or to watch some live stream gaming, visit thegaminglovers.com.